And it's Dave Ingram. I'm back again, and we're with Dan Walkow. Now, you spend a lot of time. I've been in this business for 46, coming on 47 years, and I spent my entire life really looking for somebody to look after cross-border money, because the Securities and Exchange Commission, the BC Securities Commission, the Ontario Securities Commission all said you couldn't talk to people who were on the other side of the border. And when it's Ontario and BC, you can't talk to a person's licensed in BC can't talk to or deal with his brother in Ontario. A person in Ontario can't deal with their brother in Alberta. So it's every single geopolitical jurisdiction in North America, particularly bad when you go back and forth from Canada to the States. And people that move to the States with their Canadian RRSPs and their Canadian cash accounts find that they can't be dealt with down there. And people that move to Canada from the States with their 401ks, suddenly the company doesn't want to deal with them anymore because they don't live in the States. And I was so lucky. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and out of the blue, somebody appeared in the form of Dan Walkow. And this is him. He's this cute little fellow beside me.
Hi, David.
How's that?
That's quite the lead in, isn't it?
Well, it's sort of interesting because, Dan, you are a godsend for so many people, without naming any. Fellow from New York who's just moving to Colorado wrote me an email talking about all the hassles. He says, I don't have to worry about my RRSP, though. Dan Walkow's looking after it.
Yeah.
So he's worried about this and that and all the rest of the stuff, but not worried about his RRSP because you can look after it moving from New York to Colorado, from Ontario to New York to Colorado, and nobody else can do that. Very few people.
Well, it just gets complicated, and if you're a Canadian in the States...
Then I got that email this morning, just for the record.
Oh, thank you, yeah. You know, you move to the United States, you have, well, typically we did a show here on California recently. You don't realize you're subject to California taxes on your RSP.
Yep.
David, I just got a call from a new client in California here recently who had moved 20 years ago.
Yep.
Didn't realize that he even had to file.
Oh, for 20 years, yeah.
You know, didn't realize there was California taxes due. Didn't, you know, just sort of left the country and thought everything was fine.
I mean, he moved from Canada to California.
Yeah.
Well, there's supposedly more people living in California from Manitoba than there are in Manitoba.
Yeah, big country.
And I believe that.
Big state.
Your fellow, and you know, you don't want to scare the shit out of him. Bad word. But that's what it is. If he's got himself, for the sake of argument, if he moved and he had a $100,000 RRSP, and today it's worth just $200,000, he is, by law, just the way they hauled my truck away from in front of the house without an expired license on it.
Right.
By law, he is eligible at the moment for a minimum penalty of $10,000 a year for not reporting his foreign account to Treasury on a TDF 90.
Yeah.
And
So just to clarify that, David, I think for people to understand that, what that means is if you move to the United States and you have a foreign account, say a Canadian account,
or a Brazilian or
any account, and you don't report it on your U.S. tax return.
Well, it's not the U.S. tax return, it's the Department of Treasury.
The Department of Treasury.
Department of Treasury.
Then you're subject to $10,000 a year.
That's the minimum penalty right now.
And are they collecting and prosecuting this?
Absolutely. Over 1,072 clients of a Vancouver accountant named, what was his name? Jerome Schneider. Jerome Schneider, Premier Accounting Services down on Georgia Street. Jerome himself got arrested in San Francisco, and he was fined $100,000 and got 6 months in jail. Yeah. The minimum penalty today is $10,000. The maximum is $500,000 plus 5 years in jail for not reporting a Canadian account, or a Brazilian or German or French, if the total of all the money you've got out of the country is more than $10,000 US. And that's at any one time. It doesn't have to be there today. If it was that much money last July.
Let's put the statistic, a hypothetical case of this fellow we're talking about.
Okay, I want you to just let me continue for a second. So if you had that $200,000 liable for 20, liable for tax on the $100,000 to the state of California, because California taxes the internal earnings, and the federal penalty is, are you ready for this? Ready?
Go for it.
35%. Plus 5% for every year it wasn't reported. And 20 times 5 years...
35% of the capital value of the account.
Of the account, plus 5% for every year it didn't get reported. So, theoretically, if you went to cash in today, he would have 25% tax to pay to Canada, $50,000.
Yeah, withholding, yeah.
And if the U.S. government found out about it, wanted to put the penalties in, he'd have a 35% penalty on the $200,000,
Right.
$70,000. Plus, he'd have 5% penalty for every year it wasn't reported. But it's 5% of whatever the balance was. It wasn't $200,000 for the whole year, or the rising balance. So he would have, I don't know, call it another $140,000. And then he'd owe tax on the $200,000 to the states too, although you get a foreign tax credit for the $50,000. Mm-hmm. So he actually would likely come out of it theoretically owing $50,000 or $60,000, right, even though he started off with $200,000.
Negative.
And I just want to put that. That's what the parking meter type of penalty is. Yeah. But unlike a parking meter where they only give you the penalty when you're parked there right now, they don't. The fact that you were there for 3 days and they missed you for 3 days. Mm-hmm. In income tax, they can go back and give you a penalty for every year that you missed.
For every year.
Yep.
There's no statute, 3 years, 7 years going back.
Those ones there aren't because it falls under things like money laundering and so on. It's bad stuff.
Yeah.
It's really bad not to report to the Treasury that you got this foreign account.
Yeah.
And I attended an IRS meeting put on by a guy named Gregory Thompson, who's the head of the IRS for the state of Washington. I was down there, and there was 62 other people in the room, all CPAs or enrolled agents in the states. There was nobody that was an undisciplined guy like me, except me. And you know, they got into some of the fears on some of this. It's really amazing because this was in Bellingham, and they've got lots of Canadians and people across the border and so on. So I think let's take a little. I'm talking to Dan Walkow. I'm doing most of the talking, and I just did that. I'm going to make this a break so they can break it into a segment.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come back.